Is everything all right? She hurt her foot, but it's getting better.
It feels better now, thank you.
Everyone in the small village knew the story of little Amina, a bright-eyed girl with a smile that could light up any room. But for the past few years, she had been trapped in a world of stillness, unable to walk, run, or even stand on her own. What had started as a simple accident turned into a cruel twist of fate, and no doctor or healer could explain why her legs refused to move. Every day, her parents, especially her father, would try to lift her out of bed, hoping for a tiny spark of improvement, but day after day, disappointment filled the room. The once lively home now felt heavy with sadness, the air thick with quiet sighs and unspoken worries. Amina's mother would sit by the window for hours, her eyes following children playing outside, wishing her daughter could join them. She remembered the day Amina first tried to walk, her tiny legs trembling with effort, her laughter echoing through the house. It seemed like yesterday, but now that memory was like a fading photograph, a reminder of what they had lost. Neighbors would sometimes offer advice, suggesting different doctors, remedies, and even strange rituals, but nothing seemed to work. Some whispered about curses or bad luck, while others shook their heads, saying it was just one of those things that could not be fixed. The family tried everything within their means, from expensive treatments in the city to herbal medicines recommended by old villagers. They spent sleepless nights hoping for a miracle, but with each failed attempt, the hopelessness grew heavier. Each morning, Amina would look up at her parents with innocent eyes, not understanding why she could not move like the other children, and her quiet sadness cut deeper than any words ever could. The father, a hard-working man, often found himself staring at the ceiling at night, thinking about the future. How would his daughter live? Would she ever be able to walk again? What kind of life awaited her in a world that seemed so cruel? Every thought was a storm inside his mind, but he never let his daughter see the worry in his eyes. He tried to smile for her, to give her hope, but deep inside, a seed of fear had taken root, growing quietly every day. Amina, though young, sensed the tension at home. She missed running across the garden, chasing butterflies, and feeling the wind on her face. She would sometimes attempt to stand, her tiny arms trembling, and she would fall back onto her bed with a sigh. Her parents would rush to comfort her, their hearts breaking with every attempt. The house, once full of laughter and chatter, had become a place of hushed tones, cautious movements, and silent prayers. Word about Amina's condition spread across the village, and people began to pity her. Some offered sympathy, while others avoided her family, thinking their home carried bad luck. Amina's parents had grown used to this, but it still hurt. Every glance and whisper reminded them that their daughter's life had changed, and the world outside seemed indifferent to her suffering. Despite all this, there was one thing that kept the parents going. Hope, fragile but stubborn. They could not give up. Even if the doctors said there was no cure, even if the villagers doubted, they believed that somewhere, somehow, a miracle could happen. Every day, they would talk to Amina softly, telling her stories, singing songs, and encouraging her. One day, you will walk again, my dear, we believe it, they would say, their voices trembling but full of love. And Amina, in her quiet way, seemed to believe them too, her eyes sparkling with a tiny flicker of hope that refused to die. Life had become a test of patience, love, and faith. The parents learned to celebrate small victories, like when Amina moved her fingers, or when she managed to sit up without help. Each small movement was a reminder that perhaps all was not lost, and that the miracle they longed for might still be possible. But every day also reminded them of the harsh reality. They could not make her walk, and the world continued to move around them. Amina's inability to walk made the simplest tasks impossible. From playing with other children to going outside, her world was shrinking, and yet her spirit remained, quietly fighting, waiting for something extraordinary to change everything. And so, in that small, dimly lit house, a story of desperation and hope unfolded. The family continued to care for Amina, holding on to the belief that no matter how impossible things seemed, miracles could happen. They did not know when or how, but they were ready for the moment that could change their lives forever. Little did they know that the miracle they were waiting for was about to arrive in the most unexpected way. The village had grown quiet, its usual chatter replaced by whispers about Amina, and her condition. No one could have predicted that one ordinary morning would bring someone completely unexpected, a man whose presence would change everything. The stranger appeared at the edge of the village, tall and calm, with eyes that seemed to hold secrets no one could understand. People stopped what they were doing, curious yet cautious, as he walked through the narrow lanes toward Amina's house. When he arrived, he did not introduce himself formally or boast of great knowledge. He simply spoke with confidence. "I can help your daughter walk," he said, his voice calm but firm. The father nearly laughed at first, thinking it was a cruel joke. Could anyone really claim such a thing after years of failed treatments? The mother, however, felt a strange shiver run down her spine, a mixture of fear and hope that she could not explain. The villagers gathered outside, murmuring to one another. Who is he? What is he trying to do? Some were skeptical, while others secretly hoped he might be the miracle they had all been praying for. Among the crowd was a millionaire who had come to the village for business, a man used to wealth, power, and certainty. He watched from a distance, leaning casually against a tree, amused by the spectacle, thinking, "These people are desperate, and now a stranger claims he can perform magic." He shook his head and smiled, ready to leave when he saw the father invite the man inside. Inside the modest house, Amina sat on her bed, her small legs folded, eyes wide and curious. She sensed that this stranger was different, not just another person offering empty promises. He did not look like a doctor, nor did he carry any strange tools. All he carried was calmness, patience, and an unusual air of certainty. "I'll clean her, and she'll walk," he said, repeating his words exactly as before. This time, the father could not dismiss it so easily. The way he spoke seemed almost like a challenge, a quiet promise that something extraordinary was about to happen. The mother's hands trembled as she held Amina. The girl looked up at the stranger, sensing both curiosity and fear. Her small heart seemed to beat faster, as if she too could feel that this was no ordinary visitor. The stranger crouched gently to her level, looking into her eyes, and whispered something she could not quite hear, but it made her reach out a tiny hand, something she had not done in years. The millionaire, still standing outside, leaned closer, thinking this was a dramatic performance, a clever trick for attention. He saw the villagers nodding, some clutching their hearts in anticipation, others holding their hands over their mouths in disbelief. The tension was thick, like a storm ready to break. Everyone waited, but no one knew what would happen. Not even the stranger, perhaps, for miracles have their own timing. The stranger then prepared a small basin of warm water and a few herbs. Nothing extravagant, yet the air in the room seemed charged with anticipation. He did not rush, every movement slow and deliberate, his focus entirely on Amina. The parents watched every action, their hearts racing, unsure whether to hope or brace for disappointment. Outside, the millionaire could not help but be drawn to the scene, his skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. He wondered silently, could this stranger really be serious, or is he about to humiliate himself? As the stranger finished his preparations, he spoke once more. "It is not just the water or the herbs that matter. It is belief, focus, and trust." The word struck everyone in the room, even the millionaire, who had never considered that some miracles might not come from money, technology, or power, but from patience, intent, and a deep understanding of human spirit. The villagers exchanged nervous glances, feeling the weight of the moment. The house seemed smaller now, as if holding its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. For the first time in years, Amina's parents felt a flicker of hope that was more than just wishful thinking. It was different, stronger, as if something extraordinary was beginning, and the stranger, calm yet determined, waited silently, ready to take the next step in what no one could yet imagine. The stranger's calm presence filled the small house like a quiet storm, drawing everyone's attention. His eyes, gentle yet piercing, never left Amina, and his movements were deliberate, almost ritualistic. The parents watched in silence, unsure whether to feel hope or dread. Their hearts were tangled in fear and anticipation, while the villagers outside pressed their faces against the windows, curious but hesitant to enter. The millionaire, still leaning against the tree outside, frowned slightly, a skeptical smile on his face. He had seen many strange things in his life, yet nothing had prepared him for this. A man in a simple robe, claiming he could make a girl walk, seemed almost absurd. "This is ridiculous," he muttered under his breath. But even he could not resist sneaking glances at the unfolding scene. Something in the air told him that this was no ordinary claim. The stranger began preparing a small basin of warm water, adding a few carefully chosen herbs. Nothing extravagant. Yet there was a sense of ceremony in every action. He did not speak much, but his silence felt purposeful, as if he were communicating without words. Amina's mother clutched her hands together, her knuckles white, while her husband's chest heaved with a mix of fear and hope. Neither knew whether to believe in what they were seeing. "You must trust me," the stranger finally spoke, his voice calm but commanding. "And you must trust her," he said, glancing at Amina with a faint smile. "This will require patience, and your belief is as important as any medicine or ritual." The parents exchanged a nervous glance, understanding that they were being asked to give more than just consent. They were being asked to believe in something beyond logic, beyond what they could see. Amina, still quiet, seemed to sense the weight of the moment. Her small hands gripped the edges of her bed, her legs stiff and motionless. Yet there was a spark in her eyes, a hint that she somehow understood that something was about to change. The stranger knelt beside her, slowly lifting her hands and gently cleansing them in the warm water. Every movement was careful, precise, and full of meaning, like a dance only he understood. The villagers outside whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, some crossing themselves in silent prayer. They had never seen anything like this, and many were torn between hope and disbelief. Even the millionaire, who had dismissed the stranger as a charlatan, found himself leaning closer, his curiosity stronger than his doubt. He could not look away, for something in the air hinted at the impossible. Minutes passed slowly, each one stretching longer than the last. The parents held their breath, their hearts pounding in unison. They tried to stay calm, but their thoughts raced, imagining both joy and heartbreak. What if this failed like all the other attempts? What if their daughter remained motionless, and this stranger was nothing more than another disappointment? Yet deep inside, a tiny voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, this time could be different. The stranger's hands moved to her legs, gently cleaning and massaging, speaking softly as he worked. Words in a language the parents could not understand flowed from his lips, yet the tone carried warmth and reassurance. It was as if the room itself had changed, filled with an invisible energy that made hearts beat faster and eyes widen in anticipation. The millionaire, now silent, watched in disbelief, a cold shiver running down his spine. He had dealt with billion-dollar deals, investments, and impossible odds, yet this simple, quiet act, made him feel powerless. It was not money, status, or influence that could shape the outcome, but patience, care, and belief, something beyond his understanding, something that could not be measured in currency or contracts. The parents glanced at each other, holding onto each other's hands, ready for the moment that might change everything. Their hope, fragile yet fierce, clung to the stranger's promise. "I'll clean your daughter, and she'll walk." The words echoed in the small room, each repetition stronger than the last, hinting that miracles sometimes arrived in the most ordinary of ways, and that faith, quiet, patient faith, could make the impossible possible. The air in the small house had grown thick with tension, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Every movement of the stranger was deliberate, precise, yet calm. He knelt before Amina, who sat nervously on the edge of her bed, her small hands trembling slightly. Her parents hovered close, gripping each other's hands, their eyes wide with fear and hope. Every villager peeking through the windows outside seemed to feel the same mix of disbelief and anticipation. The stranger dipped his hands into the warm basin of water once more, letting the gentle ripples lap against Amina's tiny fingers. He murmured words that seemed like a soft chant, unfamiliar but comforting. His gaze locked on hers, and for a moment, it was as if time itself had slowed. The millionaire, leaning against the tree outside, could hardly believe what he was witnessing. He had come expecting nothing but spectacle, yet the air was charged with a sense of the impossible. Then, slowly, the stranger began the final steps of his preparation, brushing his hands gently along Amina's legs, soft strokes that seemed more symbolic than physical. Yet, with each motion, there was an energy that filled the room, something unseen but deeply felt. Amina's eyes widened, and a faint shiver ran down her spine, as though her body was responding to the invisible force flowing through her. The parents held their breath, unwilling to blink, afraid that any movement might shatter the fragile moment. "Trust," the stranger whispered softly, his voice carrying warmth and authority. "This is your moment, but you must believe it is possible." Amina's lips parted slightly, and she nodded, a tiny flicker of courage igniting inside her. The room seemed almost sacred now, the air heavy yet serene. The villagers outside held their collective breath, and even the millionaire, who had never believed in miracles, felt a lump rise in his throat. With a gentle but firm touch, the stranger helped Amina stand, supporting her tiny frame. Her legs quivered, stiff and unsteady, and for a terrifying moment, it seemed like nothing would happen. But then, almost imperceptibly, her toes shifted, her knees wobbled, and a spark of motion ran through her legs. The parents gasped, clutching each other as tears began to form in their eyes. Their daughter, whom they had feared would never walk, was moving, small steps at first, but steps nonetheless. Outside, the villagers erupted quietly in whispers, some crossing themselves in awe, others stepping back in disbelief. The millionaire froze, his usual composure shattered, his mouth opened slightly, and he could only stare, unable to believe what he was seeing. Every rational thought seemed to vanish, replaced by a mixture of shock, wonder, and a strange, almost humbling awe. The world of wealth, power, and certainty he knew could not have prepared him for this simple, extraordinary act. Amina took another tentative step, and then another, her small feet finding balance. Her laughter rang out, fragile but full of life, a sound her parents had not heard in years. The mother rushed forward, tears streaming down her face, and hugged her daughter, while the father held her hands tightly, tears blurring his vision. The stranger remained kneeling, calm and humble, watching silently as the miracle unfolded. In that quiet, sunlit room, everything else seemed to fade away. The doubt, the fear, the years of struggle, all of it vanished in an instant, replaced by a joy so pure that it could not be contained. Amina's steps grew more confident, her smile brighter. The villagers outside began to cheer softly, afraid to disturb the sacredness of the moment, and the millionaire, still frozen at the doorway, realized that some things in life, hope, faith, and the human spirit, were far more powerful than any fortune or plan. It was a moment that would live forever in the hearts of everyone present, a moment when disbelief met the impossible, and the world seemed to pause just to witness a tiny girl take her first real steps in years. Little did anyone know, this was only the beginning of a story that would inspire, shock, and amaze far beyond the walls of that small village. The room was filled with a quiet, almost sacred tension as Amina continued to wobble on her tiny legs, each step more confident than the last. The parents held their breath, barely daring to move, afraid that if they blinked, the fragile moment would vanish. Their hearts raced, a mixture of hope, fear, and disbelief swirling inside them. Every second stretched longer than the last, as if time itself had slowed to witness what was happening. The stranger remained close, his hands hovering near Amina, ready to guide if she faltered. But something remarkable was happening. Amina's legs were beginning to move on their own, responding not just to the stranger's touch, but to a spark of determination deep within her. Her eyes widened with amazement as she realized she was standing on her own, something she had not done in years. A quiet gasp escaped her lips, and for the first time in a long time, her laughter rang out, fragile yet full of life. The millionaire, who had been leaning silently against the wall, froze completely, his usual air of control and confidence shattered in an instant. He had witnessed many things in his life, business deals, wealth, influence, but nothing could have prepared him for this. A young girl, once unable to move, was walking before his eyes, and the sight left him speechless, his face drained of color, and he took a small, involuntary step back, unsure if what he had seen was real. The villagers outside, who had been whispering in anticipation, now erupted into a quiet but awe-filled cheer, their eyes glistening with tears. They had never seen anything like this. And for many, it was the first time they had witnessed a true miracle. Some crossed themselves, some held hands in silent prayer, and others simply stared in disbelief. Their skepticism had been shattered in a single moment, replaced by wonder and hope. Inside, Amina's parents could hardly contain their emotions. The mother rushed forward, gathering her daughter in a tight embrace, tears streaming freely down her face. "You're walking. You're really walking," she cried, her voice breaking with joy. The father held her hands firmly, feeling every step, his own eyes moist with tears of relief and happiness. It was a moment that erased years of pain, doubt, and sleepless nights. A single step had become a lifetime of hope, realized. The stranger stood quietly, a small, humble smile on his face, watching as the impossible unfolded. He said nothing, for words were unnecessary. The miracle spoke for itself. The energy in the room seemed to shift, as if something extraordinary had touched everyone present. Amina's steps grew steadier, her confidence building with each movement, and her laughter became stronger, ringing out like music that filled every corner of the small house. The millionaire, still frozen at the doorway, finally managed to find his voice, though it was soft and almost inaudible. I didn't believe it. I never imagined," he trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. The disbelief in his voice mirrored the shock he felt in his heart. For all his wealth and power, he had never encountered a moment like this, a moment that defied logic, reason, and explanation. The stranger then gently guided Amina toward the window, where sunlight streamed in, illuminating her small figure as she took confident steps forward, her smile now radiant, her laughter echoing like a promise of a new beginning. The villagers outside watched silently, captivated. Many had tears in their eyes, some whispered prayers of gratitude, and others simply stood in awe, knowing that they had witnessed something that would stay in their hearts forever. And in that instant, everything changed. The hopelessness of the past years, the worry, the fear, and the endless nights of doubt. All of it was replaced with pure, uncontainable joy. The impossible had become reality, and everyone in the room, from the parents to the skeptical millionaire, understood that life sometimes had a way of surprising even the most doubtful hearts. Amina's first steps had become a turning point, not just for her, but for everyone who had dared to hope. The room seemed to hold its breath as Amina's small feet touched the floor with growing confidence. Each step she took felt like a victory over years of pain, fear, and disappointment. Her parents watched in amazement, their hearts pounding as if they too were walking alongside her. The mother's tears streamed freely, her voice trembling with joy. "You're walking, my sweet girl. You're really walking," she whispered, while the father held her hands tightly, unable to stop the tears from falling. The stranger remained quiet, kneeling beside her, guiding only when necessary. But it was clear that Amina was no longer relying on him. Her own determination and spirit had taken control. The miracle that everyone had been waiting for was unfolding right before their eyes. Her tiny legs moved with balance and strength, a rhythm that seemed natural and effortless, as if her body remembered what it had once known but had been unable to express. Outside, the villagers could hardly contain themselves. They had been skeptical at first, but now the whispers had turned into quiet gasps of wonder. Their eyes were wide with disbelief, many crossing themselves or bowing their heads in gratitude. For years, they had seen suffering and disappointment. But this was something entirely different, something that defied logic, reason, and expectation, something that felt sacred, almost otherworldly. Even the millionaire, who had watched everything unfold with skepticism and a faint smile at first, could not move. His eyes were wide, mouth slightly open, as though the scene had drained all thought from his mind. He had never experienced anything like this. A simple girl, once confined to her bed, was now walking and laughing, a living proof that miracles could happen, even in the most ordinary places, and even to those who had almost given up hope. The parents embraced their daughter, their hearts full, overwhelmed with gratitude. It was more than just walking. It was life renewed, a second chance, a return to what had seemed impossible. Their home, once quiet and heavy with sadness, now rang with laughter, shouts of joy, and the sound of small, determined footsteps. The stranger looked on with a faint smile, his mission complete, knowing that sometimes the greatest miracles came not from grand gestures, but from patience, care, and belief. Amina's confidence grew with every step, her laughter brighter, her smile radiant. She ran a little toward the sunlight pouring through the window, the golden rays catching in her hair, and the room seemed to glow with the energy of hope and renewal. The villagers outside cheered softly, not wanting to disturb the fragile perfection of the moment, but unable to hide their excitement. Their hearts swelled with inspiration, as if they had all witnessed something divine, something that would be remembered for generations. The millionaire, still standing silently, finally found his voice, his tone low and shaken. I've never seen anything like this in my life, he admitted, his pride and skepticism replaced by awe. It's impossible. Yet it's happening. The words left him speechless in their truth, his wealth, his power, his influence. All of it seemed meaningless compared to the sight of a little girl walking, laughing, and living fully in that moment. The stranger guided Amina to stand near her parents once more, and everyone could see how much stronger and more confident she had become. The transformation was more than physical. It was emotional, spiritual, a renewal of hope for her family, for the villagers, and even for the skeptical millionaire. The miracle had become undeniable, and in that small room, time seemed to pause, allowing everyone to soak in the wonder of the impossible made real. And so, Amina's first steps became more than a simple miracle. They became a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of faith, love, and patience. The parents held their daughter tightly. The villagers stared in awe, and the millionaire, humbled beyond words, realized that life sometimes offers moments that can neither be planned nor bought. The miracle had been realized, not just in her walking, but in the hearts and minds of everyone who had dared to witness it. Amina's journey had only just begun, but the impossible had already happened, leaving an unforgettable mark on all who had seen it. The house, once filled with worry and despair, now resonated with a calm, peaceful energy. Amina had walked, laughed, and even danced slightly on her own, and the miracle that had stunned everyone had left a lasting mark. Her parents sat quietly, holding her close, trying to absorb the reality that their daughter, after years of struggle, was finally walking. The mother's hands trembled as she brushed Amina's hair back, while the father's eyes glistened with tears. He could hardly believe that the years of fear, sleepless nights, and endless prayers had finally come to a moment like this. The stranger remained humble, standing a little apart, quietly observing the scene. He did not seek praise or recognition. His eyes reflected satisfaction, not pride, for he had simply guided what was already within Amina. The strength, determination, and courage to overcome. The parents wanted to thank him, to express the gratitude that overflowed from their hearts, but words seemed insufficient. Instead, they could only offer gentle smiles, quiet hugs, and tears that said more than words ever could. Outside, the villagers lingered, talking in hushed tones about what they had just witnessed. Many had doubted at first, but now their skepticism had vanished, replaced by awe and inspiration. People whispered about the miracle in the small house, the tiny girl who had defied all odds, and the mysterious stranger who had made it possible. Some crossed themselves, some bowed their heads in prayer, and others simply shook their heads, amazed at the incredible event they had just witnessed. The millionaire, who had watched in disbelief, finally stepped into the house, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a quiet humility. He looked at Amina with a mixture of astonishment and respect, realizing that no amount of money, power, or influence could create the kind of miracle he had just seen. His eyes lingered on the stranger, and he nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of the extraordinary, something he had never expected to experience in his carefully planned, orderly life. The family took a moment to reflect on everything that had brought them here, every hardship, every sleepless night, every failed attempt at finding help. It all seemed worth it now, not because the past was forgotten, but because the miracle had reminded them that hope never truly dies, that even in the darkest times, patience, belief, and love can open the door to the impossible. The parents realized that their faith, though tested countless times, had played a part in this miracle, and they were determined to never let go of that hope again. Amina, now more confident in her steps, held her mother's hand as she walked across the small room, her laughter echoing like music. The joy in her eyes was contagious, and even the stranger seemed to smile quietly, as if he, too, understood the depth of what had just occurred. This was more than a miracle of movement. It was a miracle of spirit, courage, and the human heart. The family had been given not only the gift of mobility, but also the gift of renewed hope and belief in the extraordinary. The villagers, though hesitant at first, now approached to offer congratulations. Their faces reflected admiration, wonder, and gratitude. Many had grown cynical over the years, but seeing this miracle unfold reminded them that life still had surprises, moments that could inspire, teach, and change even the most doubtful hearts. The story of Amina's first steps spread through the village like wildfire, bringing not only joy to her family, but also a sense of wonder to everyone who heard it. The millionaire stayed behind for a while longer, reflecting quietly on the experience. He had come to the village seeking profit and opportunity, yet he left with a lesson far greater than anything money could buy. He realized that some moments in life, like the miracle he had just witnessed, could not be measured in currency or power. They could only be felt, cherished, and respected. The gratitude he felt was deep, almost humbling, and he would carry it with him forever. And so, in that small, sunlit house, a quiet sense of gratitude and reflection settled over everyone. The miracle had not only changed Amina's life, but had touched the hearts of all who had been present, reminding them that sometimes, the most extraordinary events come when hope, love, and belief meet patience and courage. Amina's steps had become more than a miracle. They had become a lesson, a story of faith, and a symbol of gratitude that would live in everyone's hearts forever. Days passed, but the miraculous event in the small house continued to ripple through the village. Amina walked everywhere now, her steps confident and steady, her laughter ringing louder and brighter than ever before. The parents watched in awe, their hearts filled with gratitude and wonder. Each day was a celebration, a reminder that the impossible had been made real, and their lives, once shadowed by despair, were now illuminated by hope. The stranger, who had quietly guided this transformation, had already left the village, as mysteriously as he had arrived. No one knew where he had come from, or how he possessed such knowledge and skill. Yet, his impact remained, etched deeply into the lives of Amina, her family, and everyone who had witnessed the miracle. The villagers would tell stories about him for years, speaking of the quiet man who had brought a child back to life in ways that no medicine or science could explain. Amina's parents reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. They remembered the endless nights of fear, the hopeless visits to doctors, the quiet prayers whispered under dim lamplight, and they realized that every tear, every moment of despair, had been worth it, not because it had led to suffering, but because it had prepared them to truly appreciate the miracle when it arrived. Their gratitude was not only for Amina's restored mobility, but for the profound lesson they experience had taught them about patience, faith, and the power of belief. The millionaire, who had initially doubted everything, became a quiet messenger of the story, sharing it with everyone he met. He told people about the little girl who had walked again, the parents who never gave up hope, and the stranger who had made the impossible happen. His perspective on life shifted that day. He realized that true wealth was not counted in currency or possessions, but in moments of wonder, kindness, and human connection. The experience humbled him, showing that miracles could happen anywhere, even in places he least expected. Amina herself had begun to embrace her second chance at life. Her steps grew stronger each day, her laughter freer, her confidence blossoming. She began to explore the small garden behind her house, chasing butterflies, running across the soft grass, and playing with other children who had once seemed like strangers. The world that had once been closed to her now opened wide, filled with possibilities, adventures, and dreams. She learned that she could try new things, stumble, and rise again, and that each day was an opportunity to grow. The villagers often came by, offering congratulations and sharing their own small stories of hope. Each visitor carried a spark of inspiration from Amina's story, and the tale spread far beyond the village, reaching people who had lost faith in miracles, teaching them that even the smallest spark of hope could ignite a transformation. That one act of courage, one moment of belief, could ripple across lives in ways unimaginable. Years later, Amina would look back on that day with clarity and gratitude. She would never forget the quiet stranger, the warm water, the gentle guidance, and the miraculous first steps that changed everything. Her parents would remind her daily of the power of hope and patience, of the importance of never giving up, and the villagers would speak of her story as a lesson in faith and perseverance. The millionaire, though he returned to his city life, carried the memory in his heart, a reminder that wealth could not buy the lessons of hope and human resilience. The story of Amina's first steps became more than a miracle. It became a legacy, a living testament to the idea that no matter how hopeless a situation may seem, there is always a chance for change, for healing, and for new beginnings. People remembered it not just as a tale of walking again, but as a reminder that faith, love, and determination could overcome even the darkest circumstances, that miracles, though rare, are real, and they often arrive in the most unexpected forms. And so, in that small village, in a simple house now full of laughter and life, the legacy of hope endured. Amina walked, played, and grew stronger, inspiring everyone around her. The stranger may have vanished into the world, but the impact of his presence remained forever. A single promise, "I'll clean your daughter, and she'll walk," had become a story that transcended time, teaching all who heard it that faith, love, and courage are more powerful than any obstacle, and that hope, once kindled, can shine brighter than the darkest despair.